How you doing, Dave? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Peiches, Daf 88 of Masechta BavaKama. Friends, yo friends. Friends, it's the morning again. I think it's the morning. Pretty sure it's the morning. So that means I have coffee. And we're going to do Daf Peiches. Chaver, let me tell you, this is some Daf. This is some Daf. I'm assuming we're talking 50 plus minutes. Is it going to be an hour? I don't know about an hour, but it might be. This is some Daf. We got some big old Dafs coming up. Got a lot of big old Dafs recently. Got some coffee. Let's do it. Okay. I'm going to start on Daf Peiches Amud Aleph. 4 lines into the page. At the 2 dots. Hachovel be'eved knaini shel achirim chayv v'chulei. So somebody who damages, wounds somebody else's eved knaini, so he's chayv for all the 5 things. Rabbi Yehuda, however, had said that there's no boshes payment when it comes to an eved knaini. So the shaila is, why? My time with Rabbi Yehuda. How come Rabbi Yehuda says that there's no boshes payment by an eved knaini or makra? Because the pasuk says ki notzu anoshim yachdov ish ve'ochiv. Because the pasuk by boshes says ki notzu anoshim yachdov ish ve'ochiv, a fellow and his brother. V'mi sheyesh lo achva. So we're talking about people who have brotherhood. Yotze eved, to the exclusion of an eved knaini she'ein lo achva, who doesn't have brotherhood because he cannot marry a yidela. A yidela is a yida, whatever. So because an eved knaini cannot marry a Jewish woman until he's freed, and then he's a big Jew. So then, so therefore he's not shaykh to the boshes payments. V'abonon, let me drink more coffee. One sec. Chaver, do you all drink coffee when you listen to Babylon Talmud? Why not? Our chaver Adrian had said the other day that daf, I think it was Ayin Hey or something, was so long and it was so late that it was too late to drink coffee. V'abonon, the rabbis who say that an eved knaini is shaykh to boshes, ochiv hu b'mitzvahs. Yeah, but he's your brother when it comes to mitzvahs, right? Because an eved knaini is chayiv in mitzvahs ke'isha. Elamiatu l'Reb Yehuda. So one second, Reb Yehuda. So if you say that the reason why an eved knaini is not shaykh to boshes payments is because it says brotherhood. So does that mean that wherever the Torah talks about brotherhood, it excludes an eved knaini? Zomei eved lo ya'arogu. So should we say that edim zomim, that if witnesses testify, a pair of witnesses, a set of witnesses testifies against an eved knaini that he did something terrible and he's chayiv misa, and then that set of witnesses turns out that they're edim zomim, so we should say that they get off scot-free because it says by edim zomim brotherhood. So it sounds like the brotherhood would be a requirement for edim zomim. But if they're testifying about an eved knaini, then there's no brotherhood, so then they're off the hook. So Amarav says Rav Amrav Sheishes on my kra that the pasuk says Uvi arto ara mikirbecha, you have to root out the evil from your midst. Mikomakom, and that applies everywhere. I don't care who you're testifying about. So therefore we say no. By edim zomim, it would be shaykh to avodim knaim. I'm going to drink a little bit more coffee. I just need that caffeine. My brain is still turning on. I've been up for a long time. I've been up for almost 3 hours now. 4 hours now. My brain is still kind of getting its gears going. I've been up for 4 hours? What have I been doing for 4 hours? Shnikes. Wow. Yeah, I only did an Amud of Gemara. I only learned an Amud. I'm telling you, these are big old dafs. Yeah, this morning I only got so far as an Amud done so far. Okay, let's go find it. So El Me'atu L'Rabbanon. So according to the rabbis who say that a Eved Kanani is shaykh to Boshes payments, Eved Yeh Kosher L'Malchus. So let's say that an Eved Kanani can Poshet be the king of Israel. Amri L'Taimich. Tikshilach Ger L'Divrei Hakol. But one second. That's not a good... A ger, a proselyte cannot be king. So if a proselyte cannot be king, then certainly a Eved Kanani cannot be king of Israel. Elo Omar Kol, the Apostle says, Mikerev achecha mimuvcher shebeachecha. That by a king it says it has to be from within the midst of your brethren, from the choicest of your brethren. It sounds like the most miyuchis, the most gej of the brethren. My chair is a shtickle unstable. How's that? No? That? Ooh. No, still unstable. How's that? Oh, that's nice. Nice and stable. Elamiato. Darabon ye eved kosher leidus. Ho ho ho. Ho ho ho. Ho ho. Ho 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 ho. Dichse v'nei eid sheker ha'eid. Sheker ona be'achiv. Ho ho. That it says by eidus achiv. Brotherhood. And according to the rabbis, an Eved Kanani is a brother because he's a brother when it comes to mitzvahs. So maybe an Eved Kanani can be a kosher aid. Omar Ula says Ula, Eidus lo motzis. Omart, no. You cannot say that an Eved Kanani would be a kosher witness because Asya Eidus b'kal v'chomer me'isha. Because we bring a kal v'chomer from a Jewess. Uma Isha shehi ru'uya lavoi bakohol psula le'edus. If a Jewish woman who of course can marry into the congregation, and yet she's psula le'edus, so Eved she'eno ro'i lavo bakohol, so an Eved Knaini who is unfit to marry into the congregation, enu din she'posel le'edus, certainly he should be posel le'edus. To which the Gemara says, meh. Maybe I'll say that in Isha is psula le'edus, but in Eved would be kosher le'edus. How come? Ma'le'isha shekein ene ru'uya le'mila. Well, because after all, a woman is not shaykh to the mitzvah of bris milah. Tomer be'eved shu'roi le'mila. Of course, an Eved Knaini has a bris milah. So I might think that because an Eved Knaini has a bris milah, he might taka be kosher le'edus. Kohen yuchiach. Okay, but that's not really such a stark proof, because what about a kohen? Sheyeshno b'mila, a kohen is shaykh, of course, to the mitzvah of bris milah, and yet, ufasul le'edus, a kohen can't be a kosher aid, and therefore, the fact that the Eved Knaini is shaykh to the mitzvah of bris milah doesn't have any bearings on whether, it doesn't mean that he's kosher le'edus. Ma le'kohen she'enu b'mitzvahs. Yeah, but a kohen, don't bring me a rye from a kohen. A kohen isn't shaykh to mitzvahs, he's only a kohen. Tomer be'eved shehu b'mitzvahs. An Eved, however, is shaykh to mitzvahs, right? An Eved is chayav in mitzvahs like an Isha is chayav in mitzvahs. So therefore, I might think, okay, don't bring me a kashis from a kohen. Kohen isn't shaykh to mitzvahs, but an Eved Kanani is. So maybe an Eved Kanani would be able to be an aid. Isha techiach. Sheyeshne b'mitzvahs ufsul le'edus. Okay, but what about an Isha? An Isha is chayav in mitzvahs, and yet she's psul le'edus. V'chazor adin. Then we go back and say, yeah, but she doesn't have a mitzvah of milah. So lo rizek rizeh, lo rizek rizeh. Look, we're trying to bring, right. We're trying to, bring kashas meaning we're trying to say that an Eved is posel edus based on an Isha, okay, but she doesn't have mitzvah of milah, and then from a kohen, but kohen isn't chayav mitzvahs at all. So we say, look, each one has its reasons why we can't use it as a proof. But but the common denominator is shekein einun b'chol hamitzvahs ufsun lahoid. But the one common denominator that is shared between an Eved, between a kohen, between an Isha, is that in all three cases they are not shaykh to all of mitzvahs, right? right? An Eved and an Isha are pturis from mitzvahs eseh shezman gram. So and also and of course a kohen is not chayv mitzvahs, I guess, at all. Ufsun l'hoyed and the psun le'edus afani obvious Eved. So therefore, right, just like a kohen and an Isha are psulin le'edus, so oichit and Eved is posel le'edus. She'enu b'chol ha-mitzvahs u'posel l'hoyed, that he's not shaykh to all of the mitzvahs and he's posel le'edus. Mala tzad ha-shavah sheboyin shekein einoi ish. Yeah, but don't bring me a proof from Isha and Kohen, because both an Isha and a Kohen are not an Ish. But an Eved is an Ish, and therefore maybe he could be an Eid. Tomer be'Eved shu Ish, ela teisi mi Gazlin. Okay, so let's learn it out from a Gazlin. Right, a Gazlin is an Ish. A Gazlin is shaykh to all of the mitzvahs. A Gazlin is shaykh to the mitzvah of Bris Milah. A Gazlin can marry into the congregation, and yet a Gazlin is posel le'edus. So let's say that an Eved is posel le'edus, but mad le'Gazlin shekein ma'isiv garmulo. Yeah, but a Gazlin is a modna de gazach. A Gazlin, he's a thief. Okay, I understand why he's posel le'edus. Toma be'Eved shekein ma'isiv garmulo. But an Eved never did anything wrong. He never hurt nobody. So maybe he could be an Eid. Elatesi mi Gazlin. Mechad mehanoch. Okay. So rather, learn it out from a Gazlin and from one of the others. Okay, so meaning between a Gazlin and I guess either a Kohen or an Isha, we can figure out and say that an Eved is posel le'edus. Alright, and that ends that. Okay, fine, that was the whole thing. Now that I moved my chair a little bit in order to stabilize it, I gotta reach out and grab my coffee. Let's go weiter. Now, Marbe de Ravino Omar. It says Marbe de Ravino Omar. The pasuk says, Lo yumsu ovis al bonim. The pasuk says, so traditionally this is understood as Lo yumsu ovis al bonim, that fathers cannot be killed with capital punishment based on the testimony of their sons. But we darshn it to mean, however, Lo yumsu, that nobody can be testified against and subsequently killed, al pi ovis she'ein lohem chayis bonim, based on the testimony of a father whose son is not miyuchus to him. Kilu, if an Eved Knaini has a son, right, in terms of yichus, in terms of like inheritance and things like that, he would not be considered his son. So we're saying that lo yumsu avos abonim, lo yumsu kilu, you can't be killed in Bezdin based on the testimony of an avos she'en lo chayis bonim, of somebody whose son is not miyuchos to him, i.e. in Eved. The is al kadaitich ki da'amrinon, because if it enters your mind, like it's based on like the sort of simple explanation, lo yumsu avis al bonim, that when it says lo yumsu avis al bonim be'edus bonim, that a father cannot be killed based on the testimony of his son. Lichtov rachmano lo yumsu avis al b'neiim. So let the pasuk say that fathers cannot be killed from their sons. But it doesn't say al b'neiim, it says al bonim. My bonim, what does it mean? Bonim, shmamino, what it's teaching us is lo yumsu al pi ovis she'ein lohem chayis bonim. That a fellow cannot be killed in court based on the testimony of a fellow whose child is not miyuchis to him, i.e. in Eved Knaini. Elamiatu. But let me ask you a kasha. Uvonim lo yumsu aluvis. That the pasuk oichit says that bonim lo yumsu al uvis. So achinami, so let's darshan it the same way. Lo yumsu al pi bonim she'ein loim chayis uvis. That nobody can be killed in Besdin based on the testimony of a ger be'etzim, right? A proselyte. A proselyte, once he proselytizes to Judaism, once he becomes a Yid, so his father, in terms of yichus, he's no longer, right? His father is no longer considered his father in that respect, right? He's considered, right? What was it? A gershin is gayer k'kohen shenoy ladami. A proselyte who proselytizes is like a little baby fellow who becomes born. No, so therefore I'll say the same thing, right? Lo yumsu bonim, right? Lo yumsu avos al bonim, v'lo yumsu bonim al avos. What does the pasuk say? Where's that pasuk? Okay, pasuk A. Lo yumsu avos al bonim, uvanim lo yumsu al avos. So let's darshan that the same way, that you can't be killed based on the testimony of somebody who doesn't have a father that's miyuchas to him. He doesn't have a father. Ger, hachinami de posel edus. So let's say that a ger, a proselyte, is posel to edus, which of course is not true. A ger is kosher edus. So amrei hachihashta ger. Look, when it comes to a proselyte, nihi de ein lo chayis lemaila limato yesh lo chayis. Granted that a proselyte doesn't have yichus above, right? His father isn't considered his father, but if he has children, his children are considered his children. Lafuke eved, to the exclusion of an eved knaini, the ein lo chayis lo lemaila velo lemato, that he does not have any yichus. His father is not considered his father, his son is not considered his son. So an eved is posel le'edus, a ger is kosher le'edus. Disaka daitech, ger posel le'edus. Because if it entered your mind that a proselyte is posel le'edus, lichtoi v'achmone, what the Torah should write is, lo yumsu ovis al bneihem lichta amrinon, that fathers cannot be killed based on the testimony of their sons, right? Like we explained earlier, that's what the drush would be if it said bneihem, lo yumsu be'edus bonim, that fathers cannot die based on the testimony of their sons. V'nichtov rachmone, and let the Torah say, uvanim lo yumsu al ovis, which, right, uvanim lo yumsu al ovis, which we would say is dishmas mina, that we would learn from that. Trey, two things. Chada lo yumsu bonim be'edus ovis, that children would not die based on the testimony of their fathers, but also ve'idach lo yumsu al pi bonim she'en lehem chayis ovis, and also that nobody can die based on the testimony of a person who doesn't have who doesn't have a father be'etzim, a ger, a proselyte, and then. So if we had that set up, right, that it says lo yumsu avos al bneihem, to teach me that a father cannot be killed based on the testimony of the son, and when it says uvanim lo yumsu al avos, then that would teach two things: that a son cannot be killed based on the testimony of the father, and also that gerim are psul le'edus. And then once we know that a ger who doesn't have yichus in terms of his father, but his children would have yichus, and still we're saying that he's pasul le'edus, well then ve'evid nafgalei bekal v'chomer miger, and then I would know memela that if a ger is pasul le'edus, memela in evid knani is pasul le'edus, umager dilemaylo hu de'ein lo chayis avalemato yesh lo chayis pasul le'edus, a ger who's he doesn't have yichus, in terms of his parents, but he does have yichus in terms of his children, and he's pasul le'edus. Eved she'ein lo chayis lo lemaylu v'lo lematu, an eved that doesn't have any yichus, not his parents, not his kids, eino din shu pasul le'edus, then certainly he should be pasul le'edus. Elamide kasu v'achmana lo yumsu ovis al bonim. But from the fact that the Torah says lo yumsu ovis al bonim, dimashma, which implies lo yumsu al pi ovis she'ein lo chayis bonim, that you shouldn't, right? You can't be killed based on somebody whose children are not miyuchas to him, i.e., an eved knaini. So shmamina eved she'ein lo chayis lo lemayla v'lo lemato hu de pasul le'edus, that davke an eved who has no yichus, not his parents, not his kids, he is pasul le'edus. Aval ger kevin de yesh lo chayis lemato kosher le'edus. But a ger, even though he doesn't have chayis lemala, his parents wouldn't be considered his parents, but his children are considered his children. He can be a eved. He can be an aid. He can be a testimonitarian witness. So if that's the case, so say lo yumsu avos al bonim, like we said, to teach that a eved is pasul le'edus, and then just say lo uvanim lo yumsu al avosehem, that children cannot be killed based on the testimony of their fathers. I don't need al avis. Because al-ofis implies, right, I might think that a ger is posel edus. So lamalis, the cause of Achmanu, vanim lo yumsu al-ofis. Timashma lo yumsu al-pi banim shein lehem chayis ofis. Right, that when it says lo yumsu, vanim lo yumsu al-ofis, it implies that a ger would be posel edus. So we say, well, I did the cause of lo yumsu ofis al-banim, cause of nami vanim lo yumsu al-ofis. Well, look, what we really needed to say was lo yumsu ofis al-banim, to teach me that a Eved Knani is posel le'edus. Once it says lo yumsu avis al banim, so it also says uvanim lo yumsu al avis instead of avoseim, but right, for consistency. But it's not to say that the ger is posel le'edus. Wow, I just got a ringing in my left ear. And it threw me off a shtickle, but I don't think I said anything wrong. I'm going to drink some more coffee and then we're going to go weiter. All right, Chaver. Now we get to an interesting, I don't know if interesting is the right word. We get to a Gewalt. It's definitely Gewalt. Am I getting ringing again? What's with the ringing? If I'm ringing, that could throw you off. A persistent ringing in the ear. That could throw you off. We're getting to a Gewalt sugya. BavaKama sugya. Geschmack sugya. Okay, roll off my sleeves a shtickle. Maybe even I'll drink a little bit more coffee. It's probably shaykh. Alright, let's do it. Okay, here we go. Here's Gewaldig. You ready for Gewaldig? What does this have to do with anything? Okay. Because you said in the Mishnah, you got to be careful because if you damage them, you're chayiv. If they damage you, they're potter. But then we also said that an isha, right, a married woman, because if you damage her, then you're going to be chayiv, but if she damages you, she's ptur because she doesn't have money of her own. But if she gets divorced, so then she'll be chayiv to pay then. Now this next sugya gets into the whole sugya of nichsei milug and nichsei tzon barzel. Remember that from Masechet Ksubis? That be'etzem there's kind of two kinds of properties that a fella brings into the marriage, that a wife brings into the marriage. One is called nichsei milug. Nichsei milug, she owns. She owns throughout the marriage. She owns this property, and if they get divorced, so she takes them back. And if the value of the real estate increased over time, Givaldi, that's hers. Nothing to do with him. She gets it back. Now, in the meantime, he's allowed to eat the fruits. Right? If it's an apple orchard, he can eat the apples. So that's nichsei milug. It belongs to her. He could benefit from the fruits. Nichsei tzon barzel is that be'etzem, if I understand correctly, be'etzem nichsei tzon barzel are his. Right? He can do whatever he wants with them. If they go up in value, so then he benefits from it. It's his. But if they get divorced, so then he would have to pay her the value of the, let's say it's an apple orchard, of the apple orchard at the time of the marriage, and that's the nedunya. Okay, meaning right. So if it goes up or down, he benefits or loses, but he needs to guarantee the principal amount. Now, the focus of this Gemara primarily is going to be on nichsei milug, property that belongs to the wife, but that right. So she owns the guf hakarka. I'm telling you, it's a geschmack sugya. She owns the guf hakarka, but the husband has rights to the peiros, has rights to the fruits. Here we go. So we're going to have two very similar ukimtas now. One involving Reb Shmuel bar Abba, Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba, and Reb Shmuel bar Abba's mother, who's married to Reb Abba. Is Reb Shmuel bar Abba's father? I mean, that would make sense. I'm not exactly sure. That would make sense, though. But I don't know, there's a lot of Abbas going on. And then we're going to have another scenario where we don't mention names, just a father and a son and a field and Paris and Gufa Karka. So this sugya, right? So this brisa that we're about, or ukimta, whatever, this thing that we're about to mention with names, Reb Shmuel bar Abba, Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba, Shmuel, whatever. So we're going to be I'm going to mention, when referring to this, I'm going to be talking about names. I'm going to mention people's names. When we talk about the other sugya, about the father and the son, I'm just going to talk about a father and a son. That's how you know which one I'm talking about. It's that kind of a sugya. So the mother of Rav Shmuel bar Abba me'Agronia, havas nesiva leila Reb Abba. She was married to Reb Abba. See, that's why it doesn't sound like he was necessarily Reb Abba's son. It almost sounds like his mother then, I guess, had a second marriage to Reb Abba. I don't know. Whatever it is, we'll just refer to everybody by name because I don't know for sure if it's his son or not. Havas nesiva leila Reb Abba. She was married to Reb Abba. Okay, Rav Shmuel bar Abba's mother was married to Reb Abba. Kosvinu lenichse Rav Shmuel bar Abba, bro. And she gave as a gift her nichse melug to her son Rav Shmuel bar Abba. Now she owns her nichse melug. She owns the guf hakarka. She owns the property. But Reb Abba, her husband, has rights to the peiros. So can she give the nichse melug to her son Rav Shmuel bar Abba? Basar the shchiva, after she passed away. Also Rav Shmuel bar Abba, Kamid Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba. So Rav Shmuel bar Abba goes to Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba. Ukme b'nichse, and Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba says, Rav Shmuel bar Abba, the property, the nichse melug of your mother is yours. It's not Reb Abba's, it's yours. Also Reb Abba wanted the property. Omer Lemilsa Kamid Rav Oshaya. So Reb Abba went to Rav Oshaya. Also Rav Oshaya, Omer Kamid Rav Yehuda, and Rav Oshaya went to Rav Yehuda. Amalei Rav Yehuda says, Achi Omer Shmuel, that Shmuel says, Ha'isha shemachra b'nichse melug, that if a wife sells the nichse melug, b'chaye baila, during the lifetime of her husband, v'mesa, and she dies, habal motzi miyad alekuchis, the husband can go and take them from the buyer. Because because a husband inherits his wife, and if a wife dies, the husband will inherit then the nichse melug, and his claim is first. So if she later sells the nichse melug to somebody else, when she dies, the husband can take this property from the purchaser because the husband's claim is earlier, and therefore the same would apply here. Rav Shmuel bar Abba's mother had no business giving him the nichse melug since Reb Abba's claim was prior, and therefore Reb Abba can have the property. Chevra, I'm going to drink more coffee. I'm running out of coffee over here. I bet I'm done. I hope my brain is turned on enough. Amru Kame de Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba. So they went back to Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba with this psak that the nichse melug do not belong to Reb Shmuel bar Abba. They belong to Reb Abba. Omar lehu, and Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba says, look, ono masnisin yodainu. I know it says masnisa, but it's a mishnah. The Agos V'Tzunim changed it to masnisin. Ono masnisin yodainu, look, I'll tell you this. I know a mishnah. The Tanan that we learned in the mishnah. Hakosev nichosov livno le'achar moso. A fellow, a father, writes his property to his son. That he says, right, what does Rashi say? Me'ayomu la'achar misa. Right, that this property is yours, my son, from today and after misa. What that means is that from today, the guf hakarka belongs to the son. But the father continues to benefit from the fruits so long as he's alive. Okay, so the guf hakarka belongs to the son, but the peiros belong to the father. That's similar, right? In our case of Rav Shmuel bar Abba and Reb Abba, that the mother owned the guf hakarka, but Reb Abba had the rights to the peiros. So let's see what happens. Okay, so in this case, the son now owns the guf hakarka, and the father owns the rights has the rights to the peiros. So again, akosif nechosov livno, a fellow writes is property to his son, the achar moso, from now and after death. So the son owns the guf hakarka, the father has access to the peiros. Haben eino yochol limkor, so the son is not allowed to currently sell the property, because they're in the possession of the father. The father has rights to the fruits. And the father cannot sell the property to somebody else right now because they've already been written over to the son, and the son owns the guf hakarka, the property itself. Now what if the father did sell the property? Michurim ad sheyamus. Okay, so it's sold to whoever purchased it, and they can eat. They could consume the peiros of the property until the father dies. Once the father dies, and there's no longer any rights to the peiros, and the field is then entirely owned by the son. Machar abein, if the son sells the field, ein lo lilokeach, so the purchaser cannot have any benefit from the field, have any rights to the field, ad sheyamusov, until the father dies, because the father has rights to the fruits so long as he's alive. Kimayis of mia, however, when the father does die, is le lilokeach, so then the person who purchased the property from the son, at that point, once the father is in wellwood, so then the purchaser can enjoy the fruits from that point on. V'afal gav demeis habein b'chaye of, and even though the son died while the father was still alive, dilo asu lide aben, that the field never was fully in the possession of the son, right? So meaning the father had written over his field to his son. His son owned the guf akarka. The father, however, retained the rights to the fruits, and the son then sold it to somebody else. The son then died. The father is still alive. At no point did the son have access to both the guf akarka and the peiros. When the father dies, the field will go to the person who purchased it from the son, even though the son never had full access of the field because he died when the father was still alive, which means that at the time that the son died, his father still had rights to the fruits. And therefore, here's the big shaila, friends. Here's the big old shaila. The question of kinyan peiros ki kinyan aguf dami. Does having the rights to the fruits, is it like having the rights to the property itself? If we were to say that the father having the rights to the fruits, it's like he has the rights to the property itself, so then the son would be unable to sell it to somebody else. But from the fact that we're saying that if the son did sell it to somebody else, even though the father has the rights to the fruits, nonetheless the son's sale to that other person is a valid sale, and that when the father dies, it will now belong entirely to the purchaser. So that means that kinyan peiros lav ki kinyan aguf dami, that the fact that the father has rights to the fruits does not mean that he owns the field itself, and the son can still sell it. Ki Reb Shimon ben Lakish, it's like Reb Shimon ben Lakish, the Omar, that he says, Lo shna meis abein b'chaye av, that it makes no difference if the son dies while the father is still alive, de lo asu lidei debein, that it never came actually into the full possession of the son, Lo shna meis av b'chaye abein, nor does it matter if the father dies while the son is still alive, de asu lidei debein, that at that point it comes fully into the possession of the son, makes no difference. Kana lokeach, the purchaser who purchased it from the son, still it belongs to him. The itmar, that it was stated, machar habein b'chaye ha'av, if the son sold the property when the father is still alive and has rights to the fruits, umeis habein, and then the son dies b'chaye ha'av, while the father is alive. Okay, so the son had sold the property while the father was still alive, and then the son died while the father was still alive. At no point did the son have full control of the property. Rabbi Yochanan Omar lo kana lokeach. Rabbi Yochanan says that in that case the purchaser it was not a proper purchase. Rish Lakish Omar kana lokeach. Rish Lakish says that it is a proper purchase. Rabbi Yochanan Amar lo kana lokeach. So Rabbi Yochanan had said that it is not a proper purchase. Amar lach, because Rabbi Yochanan will say, ki katoni masnisin mocher abein lo kana lokeach ad sheyomus ha'av. That when the Mishnah says that the sale is that when the son sells the field, it is a valid sale, and that when the father dies, the purchaser will have full access to the field. And that when the father dies, the purchaser will have full access to the field. That's in a scenario where the son did not die before the father. The father died first. That the field at that point became fully in the control of the son. And then the son can pass that full ownership onto the purchaser. But if the son would die while the father is still alive and has rights to the fruits, and the son never had full control of the field, that the field was never fully in the possession of the son. Kimayis av nami. So then when the father dies, leis le lilokeach, the purchaser will not have access to the field. Alma kosover kinyan peris kinyan aguf dami. That means that according to Reb Yochanan, kinyan peris kinyan aguf dami, that the fact that the father has access to the fruits, it's as though he has access to the property itself, and therefore v'chizovin, and therefore when the son sold the field, when the father was still alive, lab didei zovin, he was not selling something that he owns, since the father has the rights to the fruits, and kinyan peris kinyan aguf dami, and whoever has the rights to the fruits, it's like he has access to the property itself, and therefore the son had no business selling it to somebody else. And if the son dies before the father and he never had full rights to the field, so then the purchaser didn't actually purchase it. Whereas Reb Shimon ben Lakish Omer, says Reb Shimon ben Lakish, kana lokeach, that the purchaser has in fact purchased the property. Ki katoni masnisid macher abein, that when the Mishnah says that if the son sells the property to this other fellow, when the father is still alive, ein lokeach ad sheyomus ha'av, that the purchaser doesn't belong to him until the father dies. Ki mayis of mios isle lokeach, but when the father dies, it will belong to the purchaser. Lo shna lo meis habein b'chaye ha'av. It doesn't matter if the son outlived the father, de'asu lidei debein, that it then became the full property of the son at that point when his father died. V'loshna meis habein b'chaye ha'av. Or it doesn't matter if the son died when the father was still alive, that it never was in the full possession of the son, because the father at that time still had rights to the fruits. Nonetheless, kana lokeach, when the son sold the field to the purchaser, it belongs to the purchaser. Alma kasaver kinyan peris lav ki kinyan aguf dami. So we see that Rabbi Shlakish says that kinyan peris lav ki kinyan aguf dami, that the fact that the father has access to the fruits does not make it that he has control of the property. He can eat the fruits, and that's great, but the son can still sell the property to somebody else, and it's a valid sale. He'll just have to wait until the father dies before the purchaser can benefit from the field. And when the son sells the field to the purchaser, even when the father's alive, it's a valid purchase. The purchaser just needs to wait until the father dies before he can benefit from the field. Now, continues Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba for his proof for why he says that back to the case of Reb Shmuel bar Abba and Reb Abba and his mother and the Nichsei Milog, why he ruled that the field will belong to Reb Shmuel bar Abba. Ve'anon hashta bein Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba uvein Reb Yehuda. Now everybody agrees that the halacha in this case is like Rish Lakish. Rashi points out that there are three places that we paskin like Rish Lakish over Reb Yochanan, and this is one of them. So everybody agrees, like Rish Lakish over here, that kinyan peris lav ki kinyan aguf dami, the fact that you own the fact that you have access and the rights to the fruits does not mean that it's your field. And therefore, in our case with Reb Shmuel bar Abba and Reb Abba, even though Reb Abba had access to the fruits of the mother's nichsei melug, that doesn't mean that he owns the nichsei melug, and she was able to give them to her son of Shmuel bar Abba. V'ka'am Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, and Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba is saying, Isal kadaitech kinyan peris ki kinyan aguf dami, and if you were to say that kinyan peris ki kinyan aguf dami, which would mean that Rabbi Abba he has access to the fruits, so it's kilu, he has access to the whole field, which would mean that the mother had no business giving it to her son of Shmuel bar Abba. Ki mayis av. So now says Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, so if you say kinyan peris ki kinyan guf dami, and therefore Rav Yehuda, if you're saying kinyan peris ki kinyan aguf dami, and therefore Rab Abba has the rights to the fruits and he has the rights to the field, and therefore the mother cannot give it to Rav Shmuel bar Abba. So kimayis av. So if that's the case, well then in this Mishnah with the father and the son and the purchaser and the gufa karka and the peris, so then kimayis of umayis habein b'chaya of, when the father dies and the son had died first, so then amai isle lokeach. How can we be saying like Rish Lakish that the field belongs to the purchaser when the father dies? Ki kazovin hai, when the purchaser purchased the field from the son at the time that the father still had access to the fruits. If you say kinyan peris ki kinyan aguf dami, lavdi de kazovin, the son had no business selling that field. In order to explain Rish Lakish, you have to say that kinyan peris lav ki kinyan aguf dami, and the fact that the father had access to the fruits doesn't make a difference. The son could still sell it to the purchaser. So kinyan peris lav ki kinyan aguf dami, period. And therefore, in the case of Rav Shmuel bar Abba and Reb Abba and his mother and the nichsei melug, kinyan peris lav ki kinyan aguf dami, Reb Abba does not own the field. The mother still owns the field, the gufa karka, and she gave it as a gift to her son Rav Shmuel bar Abba, and that should be valid. So Rav Yehuda, why are you saying that that the field goes to Reb Abba? It should go to Rav Shmuel bar Abba. Adru lekame to Rav Yehuda. Okay, so they brought this back to Rav Yehuda for a response. Omerlu, and he says to them, Hochi Omer Shmuel, that this is what Shmuel says. Zo ein adoma lemishnasenu, that these two cases are different. My time will come. Rav Yosef says of Yosef, look, Bishlama itani ipcha. I understand if the case in this Mishnah with the father and the son and the peris, if it was fakert, if it was the son that gave his property to his father and says, you now own the gufa karka, but I'm going to retain access to the peris, and then the father sold it to somebody else, and the question is, do we say kinyan peris or kinyan aguf dami? So itana ipcha kosiv nechosov le'oviv, that a son who makes this deal with his father, and that the father owns the gufa karka and he still has access to the peris. Ika lemivshat mina the kinyan peris lav kinyan aguf dami. If we would say that the father sells the field and it's still a good field, even if the father dies first, okay, so then we would be able to conclude kinyan peris lav kinyan aguf dami. But elahashta de katoni hakosev nechosov livno. But now that we're saying that it's a situation where the father made this deal with his son, well then the reason why the son can sell it wouldn't necessarily prove that kinyan peris lav ki kinyan aguf dami, rather mishum derai leyorshahu. The reason why the son's sale is a good sale is because anyways the son was going to inherit his father anyways, which is why, because the son was going to inherit his father anyways, which is why his sale to somebody else would be considered a valid sale, but it's not because of kinyan peris lav ki kinyan aguf dami. But Abai responds to Rav Yosef, Atu bra yoris abba, abba lo yoris bra. But what? Does that imply what? That a son inherits his father, but if a son dies, his father wouldn't inherit him? Se'ela lavuchinu lenichse mibrei kaasi. Rather, No, well, if you would say it's talking about a scenario where the son is giving the field to his father, but retaining the rights to the fruits, the reason why he's doing that is because for whatever reason he doesn't want his children to inherit it. He wants his father to inherit it, and that's why he makes that deal. So achanami. So here also, when the father's making a deal with his son, he's only making this deal because he wants the property to go to this particular son and not to the others, and not to the other sons. Ella my ena dome lemishna seinu. Rather, in what way are these two cases different? The case of Reb Shmuel bar Abba, the mother, the Nichsei Melug, in what way is that different than the case of the father and the son and the Paris and the purchaser? Mishum takonas usha. Because of the takona of usha. Meaning, yes, from that Mishnah with the father and the son and the Paris and the Lekuchis, yes, we would be able to say, Kinyan Paris, Lab, Kikinyan Aguf Dami. And if that's the case, it would make sense to say that Reb Abba has no claim to the Nichsei Melug, because the fact that he has access, he has rights to the fruits, does not make it his. And Me'ikar Adin, the mother would be able to gift the Nichsei Melug to her son, Reb Shmuel bar Abba. But Mishum Takonas Usha, but there's Takonas Usha, the enactment of the place called Usha, the Omar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina be'Usha Eskinu, that they made an enactment in Usha, Ha'isha shemachra b'nichsei melug b'chaye baila, that if a wife sells her nichsei melug when her husband is still alive, v'mesa, and she dies, habal motzi miyara lekuches, the husband is permitted to take it back from the purchaser. So we see it's a separate takana. So the reason why, Rabbi Yirmiyah is bringing a whole proof, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba is bringing a whole proof from this Mishnah with the father and the son and the Paris and the Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. At the end of the day, the reason why Rav Yehuda says, I agree with that logic, it's beautiful logic, but there's a takonas usha, that nonetheless, if she sells her nichsei melug, the husband can still take it from the lekuchis if she dies. Here also, if she gifts it to her son, the Reb Abba can still take these nichsei melug when she dies. Ravidi bar Rovin says, Ravidi bar Rovin afonanami tonino. We also learned in a Mishnah that we have a Mishnah that supports the takonas usha. Midim anu biish ploni shegerish es ishto v'nosan ksubos v'arei tachtov mishamashto. Interesting. So in Eidim Zomimim case, it's like the first Mishnah in Makis or something. In Eidim Zomimim case, where two witnesses show up in court and they say that so-and-so divorced his wife and he already paid her get. So she gets nothing. They're divorced, she already received her get, she gets nothing. The weird thing, and then of course they become Eidim Zomimim. Why, of course, they become Eidim Zomim? Because they're full of it. This couple is still married. These witnesses were coming to court and saying they're divorced, she already received her ksuba, she gets nothing. They're still married. These people are Eidim Zomim. So the shaila is, what exactly were they trying, what kind of loss exactly were they causing to her that now we do to them? So you have to do to them what they tried to do to her in this case. The thing is, it's unclear what they tried to do to her, because they're still married. As long as they're still happily married, and if she dies first, so then she never would have lost anything, because she never would have collected a ksuba. Only if he were to die first, or if they were to get divorced, okay, then she would collect the ksuba. But who's to say that he's going to die first, or that they're going to get divorced? Maybe she'll die first. So it's unclear if the damage that they were causing to her would have ever actually come to play. So therefore, what we have to do is we have to figure out, how do we evaluate the potential value of a ksuba, sort of the gamble of a ksuba, which is, we go to a person and say, hey, how much would you be willing to buy the rights to this woman's ksuba from her? Which would of course be less than the value of the ksuba, because it's a gamble. If she gets divorced, or if he dies first, so instead of her getting the ksuba payments, the purchaser will get the ksuba payments. But if she dies first, well then, there's no payment and you lose your money. So it's a gamble. It's a risk. So that potential value, that gamble, is what is the value that the Edom Zobman would have to pay this woman for this possibility of her ksuba that they tried to make her lose. So v'nimtzu Zobman, they become Edom Zobman, and omrim, we do not say yishalmu kol ksuba. So we don't say pay her the entire value of her ksuba, because she might not end up getting divorced or widowed. So ela tovas hanoyas ksubasa, rather the potential benefit of the ksuba. Ezu tovas hanoyas ksuba. How do we evaluate that? Omdin kama adam rotza litein b'ksubasa shelzo. We evaluate how much is a person willing to pay to buy her the rights to her ksuba up front. She'im nisar lo nisgasha, that if she becomes widowed or if she becomes divorced, in which case there will be a ksuba payment, then it will go to the purchaser of the ksuba. The imesa, but if she dies first, Yerashena Baila, then her husband will inherit her, and whoever purchased her ksuba loses out on receiving anything. So it's a risk. The isal kadaitech leisul takonos usha. Now, if it enters your mind that there's no takonos usha and that a married woman can sell her nichse milug, well then, amai yirashena baila. Why would her husband necessarily inherit her? Tizabin ksubasa ligamri. Let her just sell her ksuba, right? She can just sell her ksuba and get payment for it. Now. So no, that's not a proof that she's unable to sell her ksuba, because while sure maybe the nichse melog, he has access to the so I'm saying maybe you could say that she's able to sell her ksuba, and when we're saying that she can't sell her ksuba, it's talking about the nichse tzon barzel, because those he has full access to and she can't sell those, but maybe she would. I mean, it's not a proof for the takonos usha that she's unable to sell her ksuba. Maybe she is able to sell her ksuba, and when we say that she can't sell her ksuba, we're talking about the nichse tzon barzel that the husband has full access to, and he just needs to guarantee the principal. Alright, so it's not a proof for the takonos usha. Wow, that daf was a lot going on over here. The first part of the daf, we talked about how an eved is not shaykh to boshes, and then we got into all sorts of questions about avodim. We talked about avodim being possible le'edus, and alright, and then we got into the kasha of kinyan peris ki kinyan aguf dom or not, and we're going to continue, I think, with that, if I'm not mistaken, I think on tomorrow's daf as well. Tomorrow's also a daf we got to work through. Yeah, there's a lot of big stuff coming up. Friends, peace out.